How's everybody doing? Good. Okay, so we're about finished with this look at the Bible. Today we're going to be covering from where we left off, which was Hebrews. So the next book is going to be James, and then we're going to go to all the way to Jude. And so after we finish that, the next week we're going to look at Revelation, and then that will be the end, obviously. So now when we start James through Jude, you're going to notice that most of these books are very short compared to others. And I want you guys to understand, even though they are short, even though the time span I'm going to be covering them is short, that does not mean they're less important. That does not mean that shouldn't take away from their importance and their value and what they have to teach us. Because this is an introductory course, so I'm not going to be spending too much time. But because they are short, people tend to overlook them almost. But I want you guys to know that they're just as important as any other book in the Bible. And we've been talking about the epistles. We've learned about the importance of harmony with faith and works, right? Throughout the whole epistles, there's been a recurring problem that they were having, which was that faith alone can save them. They believe that. Some people started teaching that, and they believe that. And we learned that harmony between the two was the right way and the right path for everybody to get to heaven. And now we look at James, right? And obviously James is written by James, and James is mostly known because give me some things that James is known for. He was part of the 12 disciples, obviously, and he is Jesus' brother. So that's very important to know. He was actually Jesus' brother. So we looked at that. Who is Jesus? We looked at how James identified with him. So it's like your brother tells you that you're God, and you're not going to believe him too much because you guys grew up together and all that. But his praise towards Jesus affirms the fact that Christ is actually God, and that's also, even though he does not mention the fact that he's his brother or anything, it's important for us to know because he grew up with Christ, basically. So, and as the other epistles specifically talk to churches or people, this does not state, this wasn't sent to one specific person or one specific church. And I like to look at this book like the Proverbs of the New Testament. I like to look at it like that because we'll look at that one is the review time and try to connect it with the Old Testament. But I like to look at it as the Proverb of the New Testament because it's focused on practical things. It's focused on actions and practical things we can do and should be doing. And it is reminiscent in Proverbs in that nature because Proverbs talks about very relatable, very important things that you can put into action at day-to-day life. But these actions have to be driven by faith. And he talks about that because it's important because, like I said, a lot of people keep saying actions is just as important by itself and faith is just as important by itself. But he's talking about actions driven by faith. That's a very important focus on this in this book. That's what he deals with mainly. He gives us direct commands in this book. He gives us direct commands. If we want to pursue a life with Christ, he gives us direct commands on how to do that. He does not sugarcoat it. Do not read this book if you're looking for a nice motivational thing that you want to just read for a couple of minutes and just get inspired. That's not what it's about. It's about he does not he'll tell you what you're doing wrong and he's gonna tell you what you're doing right if you're doing it right. So it's important because he says do this and do that. And for the people that are, he does not make excuses for the people that fall short. If you don't do this, he says, you're not worthy. That's what he tells you. but he later on specifies on how to fix that throughout the end of the chapter. But this book focuses on like things you have to do and things that are practical, and if you do not do them, he says you're completely wrong. And James in this book is like faith is not an abstract thing. Some people seem to have like a different understanding of faith, as in like this abstract thing that's we all have, but doesn't really fully influence us. Everybody might have faith, regardless how big or how small, but it doesn't fully affect our actions. That's some people believe that, but not James. Faith is directly connected with what you do. If you have faith in God, you will do the things that God said. If you have faith in your religion, and if you have faith like day-to-day life, if you have faith in your brothers and sisters and your family, you will trust them to do what they have to do. Like you will trust them like with your life because you have faith in them, right? And so this he does not look at faith as abstract thing that is behind everybody, but as in the thing that drives us, the thing that influences our actions, and the thing that will eventually lead us to closer to God or away from Him. And he believed we all should get some real effects from faith. Like because of our faith, we should have real world actions because of it. Something should come out of it. Like faith is not something we just have and doesn't really come about until some people like their faith doesn't come into play until they face some type of challenge or they want something from God or something like that. But he says day-to-day life, things that we do, it affects that. It affects everything we do, and he gives us examples, and we're going to briefly look at some of the examples that he states. And he talks about the major commandment. Do you guys know what the one of the major commandment is? He states it in this book, and he says, love your neighbor like you love yourself, right? You guys heard this commandment many times. And he says this, loving your neighbor is fueled by your faith. You don't pick your neighbor. You don't pick who you're surrounded to some extent, as in like school might be, work, whatever. You don't pick them, right? So loving them is driven by your faith. If you don't love your brothers and sisters and the people you're surrounded with, how can you say you have faith in God, and how can you say you have faith in His like influence over you, because you're not doing what He said, which is to love your neighbor. And with that, loving your neighbor is very important, because if you do that, the rest of the commandments kind of fall into place. Like faith is not something we should. Commandments aren't something like we should be looking at as okay, I did that check. But it says that if you have faith, if you have love within you, if your faith is strong, those things will happen. You don't have to keep checking them on that. Those things will happen if you have faith, and if your actions are driven by your faith, those things will happen. And the main one being loving your neighbor, and the rest falling into places that. And the rest, he also talks about how, let's go to chapter 2, verse 17. James chapter 2, verse 17. After, this is him, kind of a background, not a background, but before this verse, he's talking about how it is very important to combine your faith with your works. And he finishes off by saying, "Thus also, faith by itself, it does not have works. It is dead." He believed that faith by itself is worthless. Previously, if you read the couple of paragraphs before that, he's talking about if somebody has faith and doesn't do anything with it, and it doesn't come into play in your day-to-day life, it means nothing to you. Your faith doesn't affect you, so why do you have it? Is basically what he's saying. It is dead. So our actions have to be driven by our faith and our belief. And as he continues talking about when he's giving examples, he talks about the importance of our tongue. And he gives many metaphors in this he says it is like our body's like a huge ship, but a huge, you can think of the biggest ship you know. It is steered by this small wheel, right? It's a steering wheel. That's what that's what it's steered with. That's the direction it goes. Like the same thing with our faith and our body. Our tongue influences it like an amazing manner, because what you say and what you don't say will affect your faith and your actions. And the other metaphor he gives for the same analogy is a forest fire coming about just by a simple match, right? Like you set a little bit of fire in a forest, and the whole thing goes into the whole thing burns, right? So if you say something that's wrong with your tongue, you're gonna be condemned, because you're gonna be condemned. Your whole like the rest of your life can be judged based on what you say. The smallest thing you say that can affect your whole outcome in the coming life, right? So he finishes it off. He doesn't say all this how you might go to hell and all that without saying something positive at the end. He talks about how we can't do it alone. This all he's talking about this. Oh, actually, there's one example he gives, and in the same chapter, still in chapter 2, if you continue, I think it's from it's from 21 on, from 21 to about 26. He gives the example of Abraham. Abraham, the leader of our church, he tells them that Abraham's faith was tested in his works, right? He was tested, he was told to sacrifice his son, and he was going to do it. And because of that, he became, it says here, was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? But with works, your faith becomes perfect. Go ahead.
Where is that exactly?
That is chapter 2, starting from 21. I read from 21 to 22. And he's telling you, your faith becomes perfect once you start putting it into action. That's what he's telling you. And it even says, like, after that, Abraham even became he was even called a friend of God. That's what afterwards he was called a friend of God, right? So your faith has an immense amount of importance in your life, and it's not something that we should just overlook. It's not something we have to use it to lead our lives and to lead others into positivity. So with that, I'm going to move on to 1 Peter. That was the main idea of James. And the 1 Peter is obviously written by Peter, and it is written to the church of Asia Minor. And at the time, this Christians were being persecuted. And you guys, bless you. The Bible is not written chronologically, right? So it kind of goes back. This is back in the time where Christians were being persecuted left and right and being killed left and right. And Peter writes to them as an encouragement to them, right? And he tries to encourage them and support them in their endeavors, and to continue on fighting, and to rejoice because, okay, so they're suffering, right? And Peter writes to them, he said, to fight, but be happy that you're suffering. Be happy that you're suffering for your belief, for your faith, right? And it says that when you suffer for Christ, you are suffering with him, and that's something we should we should appreciate, because with suffering with him, as we learned in baptism, comes later rising with him, being one with him, and then once death comes, we resurrect with him, we become one with him. And he tells them that it's not easy. He tells them persecution is expected in Christianity. He tells them that if you were going in this expecting for it to be easy, you got it wrong. It's gonna be hard. You're gonna face many challenges, and that he even says that's even a better reason to go into it, because you become saved through it. And And Peter teaches us in this book to submit. And in our day-to-day life, he tells us to submit in our day-to-day lives, as in to authority, to government, even unjust. He says submit. In homes, you face, like some of you guys are young. Your parents, you're not gonna agree with what they say most of the time, but he tells us to submit. And even when you don't believe it, you have to submit. That's what he tells us. And with that, submission is a key attribute in a Christian, because that's what we have to do. We have to submit. That was the whole thing in Christianity. And even in your workplace, you're gonna have to submit to, like, not just your boss, but like some people are there that work there longer than you, or even however annoying they might be. You're gonna have to submit to people that are a bit above you and sometimes even lower than you. So, and ranks, not as in like personality or whatever, and rank. So he tells them to submit and be happy about it and accept it. And when you're doing this, when you're facing these trials, when you're facing these sufferings, you have to make your focus on Christ. David, see you. See you. So he's talking about suffering, right? And he's talking about challenges that we're facing. He said, throughout that time, make your focus, put your focus on Christ and your focal point on Christ. Because when you do that, everything becomes easier to handle. We're facing a lot of times now, we're facing unjust and unforeseen trials and tribulations. Especially you guys seen with the Eric Garner and all that, everything that's happening with Mike Brown, all these things. These people are mad, right? And these are things that Americans we think that we shouldn't have to deal with it, because we thought that it was an equal place for all. But people, African Americans, they're in suffering right now, right? They believe that they're not being they're not in a just place as whites, right? They don't have equal rights and all that. And we face and when that happens, people go towards frustration and anger and doubt, and you see that in where's the place? I forgot. But people are going riots and destroying things, and their own house, your own town that you're destroying. And I mean, it's one thing to do it peacefully; it's another to destroy things. But during this time, people start asking more questions and praying less. People start doing more to try and fix it, and focusing on something else other than Christ. And this is the time to actually focus on Christ, to focus on prayer, to actually people think that going on destroying things could actually do something to force government to actually implement different rules and wearing the camera. But we saw that the camera didn't actually do anything in the other case. So we have to be able to during these trials and tribulations, during these sufferings, we have to put our focus on Christ and accept suffering. As in that, not it's going to always happen, so I might as well live with it. No, as in Christ is going to guide you through it and make Him the focus of your challenge and your suffering, and He will guide you through it. And we have to understand how to react when suffering comes. Okay, so Peter encourages the Christian readers to persevere through faith. That's faith is a huge part in the New Testament, and it is important to put it, like James said, to put it in our works and to persevere through our sufferings with Christ. And it isn't it's not enough. We face some of us work a lot, go to school, come to church. We do many different things, right? And it's not enough to just go through that with a smile on your face, faking it. It's not enough for you to just get out. It's not let me just get through this one semester and I'll be good, right? That's not enough. What we have to do is wake up every morning and each day we have to be able to say, instead of like instead of just putting a smile on your face, focus on God, and you want Him to guide you, right? You want Him to be able not just ignore the troubles, but face them and actually get through them. And like, just don't try to go around your troubles. Don't try to do things half. Yeah. So that's the teachings that Peter teaches us in the First Peter, and it is important because a lot of these things can be applied today in regards to suffering and in regards to unjust things that are happening in our lives, and things that are sometimes seem out of our control, but actually it is with when we put prayer and faith into play. So that was the main focus on First Peter, and so we're gonna look at Second Peter after this, which like First Peter, obviously Peter wrote it, and I like looking at Second Peter. If you've been focusing and learning with me in the epistles, you guys remember Galatians. It was very enlightening and it was very important. And Second Peter is very similar to Galatians. It's similar in regards to, in Galatians they started facing false teachings, right? They started facing people who were Gnostics, right? Which were teaching that faith apart from works, apart from repentance, apart from virtues, will actually save you. Will actually lead you to heaven. And that's a terrible teaching, and that's the teaching we have to stay away from. And it is the same problem that we face in Second Peter. He teaches us that learning about faith and clinging on to the proper knowledge, the best way that's the best way to go against false teachings. If you know things, if you are taught well, and if you're taught the right things, there's no way somebody's going to teach you falsely and you're just going to accept it. If you've been learning with us, if you've been staying in the church, being educated in regards to your faith, your pillars, your what it means to have communion, baptism, and all that, if you've been learning these things, it's hard for somebody to trick you with false teachings. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very much harder, and you strengthen your faith by knowledge. And this is what he focuses on, because people were facing the fact that there were false teaching. He teaches them that knowledge is the key. Knowledge is the way to combat it and to have true power against it. So to guard against, he teaches us to guard against false teaching and protect our families and our churches. And the only way to do that is by learning how to serve, by learning how to teach, by learning all these different things. Knowledge, he tells us, knowledge is the key. And this is very important. And knowledge, not just in how to teach or scriptures and all that, but knowledge of Christ. Knowing Christ is a huge part in our faith. And that is why David taught about who is Jesus. That is very important in our faith. And how the way we identify him will lead us towards closer or away from him, because the way we identify him and how we know him is directly connected to our faith. And this is what he says: knowledge is the key. Knowledge is power. I think that's where the saying came from. Knowledge is power, because it's more true if that saying is true anywhere else. It's more true in this book than anywhere else, because that's exactly what he says. Because of knowledge, we are able to strengthen our faith and to better our faith and to guide others towards the improvement of our church and our lives. So that is the main. That's the main focus of Second Peter. Is everybody with me? A lot of people are like dozing off.
David, stand up. I was the one guy that was up. I was the one guy.
Be quiet, please. So, if you guys have any questions right now, just what we've been talking about so far. Do you have any questions, David?
I'm good.
You sure?
Mm-hmm.
You want me to ask you a question?
I'm alright.
So far we've covered James and the First and Second Peter, and the next book is First John, right? We're gonna look at First John, and obviously, again, most of these books that we're covering today are obvious in the fact that it is written by the name of the book. John is written by John. So he talks about what we will face as Christians, what we have to expect when it comes to Christianity. When we are Christians, there are things that come about, and he's telling us these are the things that are that you're gonna face. And he makes a lot of this in this book is he makes like parallel arguments where he gives you two sides of this opposite things basically, and he gives you facts that are right and wrong basically. He says there is a right thing to do and there's a wrong thing to do. There's no in between. Basically, that's what he says a lot of time. And the examples he gives is the Christ versus the Antichrist. He says the light versus darkness. He says the truth versus falsehood. He talks about righteousness versus sin, love of the Father versus love of the world. All these things are things that we're facing today. And he talks about the Spirit of God versus the Spirit of the Antichrist. And you okay? So we have to understand this is what we're gonna face. This is our challenge. This is what we have to look forward to in terms of like fighting it. Like if you know, like you guys know the saying, knowing who you're going up against is gonna give you like way better, advantage of others who do not actually know what they're going through. So reading this book is gonna prepare you to understand that what you're gonna face. And he tells us John wanted readers to experience like true fellowship with God and his God's people. But to do that, we have to put each other's differences aside. He wants us to unite. He wants us to have fellowship with ourselves and with God, right? So the only way we're going to do that is to stop arguing with one another, stop doing all these things within the church that are like causing it to like crumble, and stop doing like going up against each other. He says, to strengthen ourselves, and the only way to do that is by putting those things aside, and it can be extremely difficult. People are not going to give up an inch in some regards when it comes to church and the power they have. And some people might be driven by power rather than faith and what they have been taught. So when it comes to that, it can be very difficult to give up your power, and it is even more difficult sometimes to admit that you're wrong. The only way to put issues aside is like, it's not like let's agree to disagree. That's not how it works. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong. That's what he's saying. There's right and there's wrong. There's faith in God and there's faith in the Antichrist, right? So he's saying that we have to like talk to each other, understand who's right, and then move on and come together. And the only way that's going to happen is if somebody is willing to accept that they're wrong. If all of us, like, if we keep saying, oh, let's agree to disagree, that same thing that we disagree upon, although it might seem like not as important right now, let's say we disagree on like if like guys should sit on one side, girls should sit on the other. Let's say some two people disagree on that fact today. When it's only like three of each people, but when it's thousands of people and you don't like they don't agree on the fact that the importance of it and all that, it's gonna lead to something else. And without somebody being able to accept that they're wrong and being able to be corrected, it's gonna lead into more and more trials and tribulations. And he focuses on three issues. And the first one is zealot of believers, which is like you have to be passionate, you have to be energetic, and you have to be basically you have to be passionate in your beliefs. You have to be able to be excited about like when you teach. If I'm like sleeping around right now when I'm teaching you guys, like if I don't care about the subject, why should you, right? I care. Some don't, but it's okay. Like if some of you guys care, that's enough for me. So you have to be zealous, and you have to be able, like you have to be passionate on what you do, especially when it comes to your faith, because that's like it will lead people closer towards you and better your faith, and lead them towards the right path. And second, what he talks about is standing firm against false teachings. This, like I said, we've looked at. This is the fourth. This is the fourth book today, and this came up almost all four of them. Standing up against false teachings. When you see something wrong, don't hold your tongue. Don't you have to speak up. You have to speak up. That's how it is. Because something as little as something that very little that you see wrong today is gonna lead to something else. And even if it doesn't lead to something else, it could lead you to being able to accept wrong things. Like if you accept a whole bunch of little things, someday something big is gonna happen, and you're gonna be like impervious to it because you don't see the importance of the right path and being able to speak up when it comes to your faith, because there's no compromise. You can't not compromise when it comes to your belief and your faith, and you shouldn't allow false teachings in that regards. That's the second one he talks about. The three, like I said, he focuses on three of them. The first one being passionate, the second being firmly against false teaching, and the third one being reassuring Christians that they have eternal life. This is important because we have to understand, although what we are doing today, strengthening the church, bringing Christians or others to our faith, although that's important, this is a temporary life. This is a stop. This is not where we're going to. There's a better, there's a better end to our life, and this is something that's gonna be temporary, and we shouldn't be too comfortable. We should not focus on the worldly things, because it's just a stop in our journey, and we're not actually at the finish line yet. So it talks about important stuff. I hope you guys are writing it down. Being passionate, standing firm against false teachings, and reassuring Christians that there is something out there to look forward to. Previously, the previous book, we talked about how suffering is a huge thing when it comes to Christ and Christianity, because we're going to face a lot of challenges, and knowing that there is something for you to look forward to, it's going to be great. It's like working all weekend, knowing that you're going to get a good pay, knowing that you're going to get it makes it worthy. It makes it like you, although you're facing challenges now, bless you, you're going to get through it, because that's waiting for you. And the best paycheck you can have is obviously eternal life. So we have to be able to look forward towards that. So the next book we're going to look at is the 2nd John, and which obviously once again is written by John. And the main focus I want to look at in 2nd John is, you guys have to understand, these books, especially John, they're very short. It's very simple for you guys to read and to have a better understanding and a personal connection with the Bible, because previously, before I started teaching and all that, although I had some knowledge because I came here on a regular basis, I didn't read as much as I would like. Well, I did exactly read as much as I would like, but like, but I didn't understand the importance of it until you actually start reading, and just reading the books will like guide you. Like if I ask you guys, what are the 14 epistles? Which one is the first one? If I ask you guys, you guys might not know, because like you might not have read it or before this class, right? So just knowing, like even understanding that, in Acts, like how we learned in Acts, it's Peter, and then Saul. The first part is Peter, and the second part is Saul, and how Saul became Paul, right? So understanding that, you're gonna like understand that like within Acts, you know that Paul actually after being converted, he started teaching, right? And then and you know that Paul wrote a lot of books, right? So the following books should be what he wrote, right? And it is. So the next 14 books is what he wrote, right? So just basic understanding of these things is going to help you guide you through the Bible and guide you in your faith. And if somebody asks you like, what's the last book of the epistles, you'll be able to say like Hebrews or something like that. So just little things that will guide you in your way. So second book of John is also talks about the what we have to do and the true Christian care. That's what he says. And in chapter 1, verse 5, he says, and I now plead with you, lady, not that. Okay, so he says, love one another, right? It's not the whole thing that he says, but he says, love one another. That's what I want you to take out of that. And this is love, and that one makes according to his commandment. This is what commandment that as you have heard from the beginning, you should always walk in it, right? So he says to love one another. He says to be careful, but he says love one another, and that means like to love everybody, right? That sounds good and all, but he also says to be careful of who you love, right? Be careful of who you love, because again, we're looking at this within the same, like we looked at it already, like I think 4 times. He says there are false teachers again.
I'm getting a phone.
He says the whole thing is, the whole book is, he talks about, the book talks about he's sending somebody who's a female. But we later understand that it is actually, he's talking about the church, and he's sending it to the church, like generally a church. So like it's not a specific church that he's sending to, but he talks about mainly to love one another. But with that comes like, we got to be careful, because he says, like we've been looking, to be careful who you love, because there are false teachers, and we have to be careful of them. And if we just keep loving everybody, welcoming everybody into our church without understanding, like giving like service, power of like service to somebody who is not actually in the right faith, or who is a heretic, it will lead others away from God, and it will cause the people that gave the power like to even lose their position, or to lose their faith, because they're given the responsibility to examine somebody and to focus on understanding them, because before they give them that power of service. And we have to focus on that. And the third book of John, with that second one, that's about mostly, that's all I want to look at with the second book of John. And all you guys got to know for that is he says to love everybody, but to be careful who you love, because there are false believers and false teachers and heretics. And the next one is the third book of John. The third book of John is also also written by John. He writes it to a guy named Gaius, a leader of one of the churches in Asia, right? And the reason he writes it, like he was actually going to go there. He was actually going to go there, but somebody actually stops him. There's a different guy who is also a leader of the church, but he stops people from coming to churches, and he stops. I don't know how to say his name. Diotrephes. I can spell it for you guys. Diotrephes. Diotrephes. Yes. That's
Spell it again.
Diotrephes. Yeah, Diotrephes. Okay. He had taken control of one of the churches there and used his power to ban like certain traveling missionaries. And when he did that, Paul couldn't get to Gaius, and he writes to Gaius, commanding him, commanding him and the believers to hold fast and to be to stand firm against Diotrephes, but be lovingly. Do it lovingly. Don't do it like attacking him. Don't do it like that. He tells them to stand firm in your faith, to not do like false, not focus on false teachings or anything that he says, but to do it lovingly. Don't do anything aggressive or anything like that. And this is important because Paul is trying to get to them. He was going to go to them, but he was stopped, right? And that is important because this guy is, with his power, he is sending people away from the church, right? And that will lead how we welcome somebody to our church and how we show hospitality to our church. Like when people come to our church is very important. Go ahead.
Say Paul or John?
John, sorry. I said Paul?
Yeah.
Oh, my fault. John is what I meant to say. So, so it's John. So we have to focus on understand that our hospitality towards letting people in the church, although being careful, although doing it lovingly, but being careful, there are people that are out there who are against us, but to do it, to be welcoming to local churches, to everybody, different religions, but being affirmed that if they are willing to learn, if they are willing to change, and if they are willing to learn the right way, we are here and we are able to teach them. And people that look different coming to our church, that like especially here when it's like a lot of older Habesha people, they seem to judge very fast. When somebody that's different, like if a white guy comes in, they stop. That's it. Like they don't do that, but people focus on it a lot. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be a regular thing, like to where everybody's coming in to like learn, and like it shouldn't be a surprising thing that somebody came to learn. And so we have to be able to welcome people, unlike Diotrephes, who was stopping people from coming. He stopped John. Excuse me. He stopped John from coming and teaching him, and he tells them at the end, I will come and I will teach you, right? And then the last book which we're gonna look at, which is the book of Jude. Okay, so this one is this one I'm not gonna review too much because it is once again talking about. It is fighting for your faith almost, being firm in your faith and being able to stand firmly, but being careful that like you're not doing it aggressively. Like John said, you have to do it lovingly. You have to be able to fight for what you want to fight for, but doing it lovingly. It's not like you're attacking somebody. You are telling them the right way. You are telling them what is right and what is wrong, and they have to be able to. They have to be the one who chooses the path, right? So, and he talks about he talks about false teaching. This is important. This is important for us to understand because false teaching is all around us, and not just false teaching as in somebody coming in and saying Christ is not the right way. But like things that lead you away from Christ, whether it's social media, whether it's your friends, whether it's partying, or whether it's school or work, whatever it is, something that leads you away from Christ is going to be standing in between your faith and your future. So you have to be able to pick that out and and you have to be able to understand what's coming. And he talks about the punishment for those false teachers. He talks about false teachers and what awaits them, and then he talks about the characters of false teachers, and it talks about a lot about false teaching and what their characteristics are, and that's important to know so we can obviously stand against it. And the whole book is basically talking about false teaching and what we can do against it, and what its effects is on our faith. And so we have to be able to stand firm in our faith, not aggressively, lovingly, but still standing firm nonetheless. And we have to be careful of false teachers. And he talks about what we can do to stop that, which is knowledge and being able to call them out. If they're saying something that's wrong, call them out and not hold your tongue. And that's pretty much it for Jude, and that's pretty much it for today. And next week we're gonna look at Revelation, and with that we're gonna finish the Bible. I guess it was shorter than I thought it would be. In regards, I thought I would go a lot more in depth, but I was able to keep it not too much in depth, but still able to tell you guys what it's mainly about and teach you the general aspects of it. So when you guys read it, you'll be able to have a better understanding of it. And with some guidance, I hope I was able to do that. Any questions today's lesson?